The moment you realize they're laughing at you, not with you, is the moment you stop laughing too. It was supposed to be a celebration. His cousin was having a baby shower filled with pastel decorations, catered snacks, and the kind of loud family chaos that always made me feel like an outsider trying to earn a seat. I wore the dress he liked, smiled when his mother made her usual comment about how quiet I was, pretended not to notice how his sister barely acknowledged me unless it was to correct something I said. I was used to it. I told myself it was just family culture, loud, blunt, playful. But deep down, I knew better. There's a difference between playful and cruel. I just didn't want to admit how often they crossed that line. The moment came during a lull in the games, when people were standing around sipping punch and waiting for cake. His uncle made a joke about how long we'd been married without kids, and instead of brushing it off, my husband, raised his glass and said, "Can you blame me? Who'd want to have kids with someone that miserable in the morning?" Laughter. Not polite laughter. Real, belly-deep laughter. His mom howled. His sister covered her mouth like it was too much, but she was smiling. I just stood there, frozen. He didn't look at me. Didn't check if I was okay. Just kept grinning, proud of himself for being funny. My hands were shaking, but I didn't want to give them that. I set down my drink, turned, and walked out. No one followed. No one stopped me. The air outside was sharp, cold enough to make me shiver, but it cleared my head. I sat in the car for 15 minutes, staring at the steering wheel. I thought about going back in, smiling, saying it was fine, laughing it off like I always did, but I didn't. I started the engine, and in that moment, something shifted. It wasn't rage. Not yet. It was the first crack in the glass. The first time I asked myself, what if I didn't deserve this? They don't care about what broke you, only that you didn't break quietly. By the time I pulled into our driveway, the group chat was already lighting up like a broken alarm. His mother first. That was completely uncalled for. You embarrassed everyone walking out like that. Then his sister. You always take things so personally. It was just a joke. Then a string of messages, guilt-drenched in exclamation points and passive remarks. This family doesn't do drama. You knew how we are when you married into this. You should have talked to him privately. But he didn't talk to me privately when he made the joke. He humiliated me publicly and now expected me to pretend it hadn't happened. I didn't respond. He came home an hour later. No apology. No regret. Just, "You made a scene." I didn't answer. He sat on the edge of the bed like he was the one exhausted. "Next time, can you just act normal? You know how they are. Don't blow things out of proportion." And there it was, that familiar tone. Like I was a problem to be managed, not a person to be respected. For years, I'd convinced myself he didn't mean it that way. That he just didn't know how to handle emotions, or was raised in a family that valued tough skin. But in that moment, I realized something. He was never trying to understand me. He was trying to silence me. The only message that didn't make me flinch came from my best friend, Rachel. "Saw the video. Don't go back in there. You didn't overreact. You finally reacted." She was right. I wasn't upset because of a single joke. I was upset because it had been building for years. The eye rolls. The cold shoulders. The offhand comments passed off as teasing. I looked at my phone again. 10 new messages, all some variation of "you need to apologize." But for the first time, I asked myself, apologize for what? For finally leaving a room where I was always the punchline? No, not anymore. When you stop making excuses for people, you start hearing the truth they've been speaking all along. Rachel came over the next morning with coffee, and that look in her eyes, the one she wore whenever she knew I was about to justify something I shouldn't. She didn't ask what happened. She didn't need to. Instead, she pulled out her phone and started scrolling. "Remember this?" she asked, showing me a photo from a party 2 years ago. I was standing next to him, shoulders tight, smile flat. He was pointing at me, mid-joke. eyes lit up like I was a puppet for his punchline. I remember I said quietly, "That's the night he called you the most boring person in the room, and your mother-in-law laughed so hard she cried." I had forgotten that. Or buried it. Rachel didn't stop there. She started naming them, the little jabs, the veiled insults, the moments I'd brushed off because that's just how they are. And as she talked, I remembered more. How his sister once called me decorative. How his mother always corrected me when I spoke about my work. How he once told me to change before we left the house because no one wants to see you try that hard. I had edited those memories, softened them, made them survivable. But now? Now they burned in full color. Meanwhile, the family group chat had shifted tone. The jokes were gone, replaced with memes, pointed quotes, and carefully worded guilt trips. One from his aunt. "Marriage means compromise. If you want everything your way, maybe you weren't ready." One from him. "Can we talk? You're blowing this up way bigger than it needs to be." And then he showed up. Unannounced. Uninvited. He stood in our doorway like nothing had happened. "Let's be adults," he said. "This is getting ridiculous." I looked at him, really looked. And I didn't see a man who loved me. I saw a man who loved control. I didn't raise my voice. I just said, "You can't fix this with silence and blame. Not anymore." He blinked like he didn't recognize me. Maybe he didn't. Because I was done shrinking. When they invite you back to apologize, it's because they never expected you to tell the truth out loud. The invitation came 2 days later. A dinner. Just to talk. His mother's message was dripping in sweet poison. "Let's all move past this. Family is more important than hurt feelings." Rachel offered to come with me. I almost said no. But then I pictured walking into that house alone, sitting across from the same people who laughed while I disappeared from the room, and I knew I needed someone on my side, someone who wouldn't ask me to smile through it. The house looked exactly the same as always. Framed pictures. Perfect table setting. Fake warmth. His mother greeted me with a hug I didn't return. His sister gave a tight smile. His father didn't look up from his drink. He waited at the far end of the table like he was hosting a press conference. I sat down. They waited. And I realized what they were expecting. A speech about regret. An apology. A nice little bow to tie off the incident. Instead, I reached into my bag and pulled out a folded sheet of paper. "I wrote something," I said. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I made a list. Not of everything, just the ones I remember. The comments. The jokes. The nights I cried in the bathroom while you all ate dessert. His mother blinked. His sister shifted. He opened his mouth, but I held up my hand. I sat through this for years. I made excuses for all of you. I convinced myself that love meant endurance. That family meant silence. That being included was better than being respected. I looked each of them in the eye. No more. Then I pulled out the second envelope. Set it in front of him. "Those are the divorce papers." A beat of silence. Then his father scoffed. His mother gasped. He looked like he'd been slapped with ice. "I'm not asking for your blessing," I said as I stood. "I'm taking back my life." Rachel followed me out. No one stopped us. They never do when they think you'll come back. But I wasn't coming back. Not ever. When you stop defending yourself to people who never listened, you finally start hearing yourself. No one said a word as I left the house. No hands reached out. No voices called after me. The silence trailed me to the car like a shadow I finally outran. The next morning, the fallout began. He texted first, short, sharp. "You really did this. You just gave up. You've ruined everything." I didn't answer. Then came the calls from blocked numbers. The voice messages from his sister that started with "I'm trying to be civil" and ended with "You'll regret this." His mother sent me a long email titled "A Woman's Duty." I didn't read it. I didn't owe them my attention anymore. Instead, I met with a lawyer. I started paperwork. I changed my locks. And I moved into the guest room at my parents' house, not forever, but long enough to remember what a safe space felt like. My mom cried when I arrived, not from sadness, from relief. "You don't have to explain," she said, holding me. "You just have to rest." Rest. That word felt foreign. But my body understood it before my mind did. Rachel brought over a care package, tea, a journal, a tiny succulent. "Proof you can keep something alive," she teased. For the first time in days, I laughed. Really laughed. The world didn't end. It opened. I started waking up earlier, sitting in silence, reclaiming small things, music I liked, food I enjoyed, the color yellow. He hated yellow, called it a try-hard color. I bought a yellow mug and used it every morning. And though he kept calling, though his name showed up on my phone screen like a bruise that wouldn't fade, I didn't answer. Because nothing he said could change the truth. He didn't lose a wife. He lost a mirror that finally cracked. And I didn't break. I broke free. When control slips from their hands, they don't beg, they corner. But you don't owe them fear anymore. It had been quiet for almost a week. No new messages. No missed calls. Nothing from his family. I thought maybe it was over. Maybe the storm had passed. Until he showed up. I was home alone, folding laundry in my parents' guest room, when I heard the knock. Not polite. Not uncertain. 3 sharp pounds, like he still thought he had the right. I didn't open the door. Just looked through the window. There he was. Same jacket. Same entitled posture. But something in his eyes was different this time. Panic. I cracked the window, just enough for my voice. "You need to leave." He stepped forward. "I just want to talk." "No. You want control." His jaw tensed. "You're being dramatic." There it was, the old language. But I didn't flinch. "You showed who you were," I said. "And I finally believed you." He laughed once, bitter. "So this is it? You throw it all away." "No," I said. "I'm protecting what's left." He started talking faster then. About how I was confused, how his mother was heartbroken, how people were talking. "They think you've lost it." I didn't answer. He leaned in, quieter now. "You know you won't find anyone who'll love you like I did." I met his eyes, steady. "Exactly." That hit harder than shouting. He blinked. For the first time, he looked small. Not sad, exposed. "I'll call the police if you don't leave," I said. Calm. Measured. He stood there a second longer. Then stepped back. No goodbye. Just silence. When he left, I locked the door, sat down, and let the weight roll off me like storm water sliding off a roof. He was never going to understand why I left. Because he never cared what it cost me to stay. And I was done paying. Healing doesn't look like fireworks, it looks like silence that doesn't hurt anymore. The papers were signed on a Tuesday. No drama. No courtroom speeches. Just ink on paper, initials on lines, and a notary who didn't ask questions. I didn't cry. I thought I might, for what never would be. But instead, I felt still. Like my soul had finally stopped flinching. That evening, I met Rachel and 2 other friends for dinner. We didn't celebrate, exactly. It wasn't a victory party. But there was laughter. There was lightness. And at the end of the night, someone raised a glass and said, to her, for finally choosing peace over performance. I moved into a small apartment the next week. Nothing fancy. A little older. With windows that creaked open and a sink that made a cheerful knocking sound every time I ran hot water. It was perfect. I bought fresh linens. A new plant. A yellow rug. I started sleeping through the night. Sometimes people reached out. An old coworker. A cousin from his side who said, I always saw how they treated you. I'm sorry I didn't speak up. I didn't need apologies. But I accepted them anyway. Not for them. For me. One morning, I stood in the middle of my new living room, a mug of tea in my hand, watching sunlight creep across the floor. No one was calling my name. No one was waiting to be pleased. There was no one to explain myself to. Just me. And, for the first time in years, That was enough. I made toast, watered my plant, sat by the window, and watched a breeze tug at the curtains. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. There were still hard days, quiet grief, habits that needed rewiring. But I wasn't afraid of silence anymore. Because now, silence meant safety. And the sound of my own breath was no longer something I had to hold in.